and welcome to Season 14, Episode 9 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Wednesday, the 5th of May. We're recording a little late this week due to unforeseen circumstances, but that shouldn't affect your enjoyment of the show. I'm Alan, and joining me this week is Martin. Hello, Martin.
Hello, how you doing?
Yes, not bad. Very relaxed. Enjoying fun employment. and Mark, how are you?
Hello. Sorry, my fault we're late. I didn't have a voice when we would normally be recording this.
And you only just have one now, it seems.
Unfortunately. Well, I'm soldiering through.
It's not the usual, Mark, is it?
So we've taken the liberty in the show notes of removing every third word so that you don't have to say quite so much. But what have you been doing this week?
Much to the listener's relief. I have been debugging DNS issues.
It's always DNS, isn't it?
Now, this sounds like my jam. What kind of DNS issues have you been debugging? This sounds fab.
Well, so I have AdGuard Home installed on my home server,
right,
which I use as the DHCP server and the local DNS server for my network. And that means that when a device connects and gets an IP address, it can then automatically add that to the DNS, or I can set up DNS records for the things which are on my network, and then I can refer to things that I know about by host name rather than by IP address, which is nice. However, because AdGuard Home is in active development, and especially the DHCP server is in active development, sometimes things go wrong. So I had an issue whereby suddenly all of the things which I was referring to by hostname.lan suddenly wouldn't resolve anymore.
Ouch.
Which was fun. So I did some digging around, and then I found actually AdGuard is very well and enthusiastically supported by its developers, and they're very responsive to bugs. And this bug had already been filed and quite extensively discussed, and there was already a fix available in the Edge channel for the snap.
Oh, nice.
And I've had a few instances before where I've reported a bug and switched to the snap and tested out a fix, and then switched back and then waited for it to be released, and it upgraded. And it's actually been a really good experience, both in terms of interacting with the developers and using a snap for something like that. I don't really want to think too hard about how that might work if it was a Debian package. It's been really good.
Yeah. That is good. It's good to hear that as an end user, your experience was positive. You encountered a problem and you had an easy resolution. I am interested to ask, do AdGuard have their own DHCP server? They're not using something like DNS Mask?
I don't know what it is under the hood,
okay.
But I believe that it's something they've written themselves as part of AdGuard Home. But then the other day, I was merrily using my network, and as were other people in my household, and everything just went crazy and stopped working entirely, and then came back. And I was sitting in the Ubuntu Podcast Chatter Telegram channel, and somebody said, "Does anyone here use Quad 9 DNS servers?" And I thought, I wonder if I do. So I went into AdGuard, and sure enough, that was set as my upstream DNS server, which is what AdGuard will use to ask for addresses of things that aren't on my network. And it turned out that they were subject to a denial of service attack at that point. So I added another DNS server to that list, and everything started working again. So I've been having all sorts of fun with DNS.
All network problems are DNS problems, is what we can learn from that.
Martin, what have you been up to this week?
I have been modifying some of my NUCs to be passively called fanless devices.
Why?
Well, it's a good question.
Because it's good content for YouTube, that's why.
Well, no. So I bought these cases. I'll tell you the story. It's all to do with this podcast. I used to use NUCs as my principal workstation. So when we recorded these podcasts, I was using NUCs as my main machine. And our friend Joe Ressington used to moan endlessly that there was too much fan noise emanating from these NUCs. They're very small, right, whiny fans. So way back then, I bought these passively cooled cases and then did nothing with them for years. and I'm just getting round to like catching up on a backlog of projects. And I was like, well, these are kind of cool. I should do this. So they're now behind me and they're utterly silent and running far cooler than they ever did with their terrible little whiny fans inside them. So I'm very happy with the outcome.
I did see you with your screwdriver out on Twitch, I think it was, the other night, putting it together. That was quite entertaining, with you unfolding this giant sheet of how you put a computer together. That was quite good fun. It's quite entertaining.
I had half the instructions. I had the assembly instructions, but not the disassembly instructions.
It's not like Haynes manual. Assembly is the reverse of removal.
You know, it was good fun. Anyway, right. So yeah, twitch.tv/Wimpy's World to see that.
Excellent. Right, let's get on with the show. And first up, we have a whole bevy of community news. Let's start off with you, Martin. What's first?
Well, a curious project has sprung up called paxstool, which is from somebody who has transitioned from Ubuntu to Arch Linux for their desktop, but for their servers prefer the reliability of Ubuntu, but love the AUR. So they have created paxstool, which is an AUR-like system for Ubuntu. And I have very many opinions.
As our resident Arch expert, Martin, what's the AUR?
Okay, the AUR is basically like PPAs that build from source. I think that's the easiest way to describe them. If you go back to the BSD roots, it's like a BSD ports tree.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
You can think of it as one giant repository full of lots of community-maintained scripts, which then build software on end users' machines.
Right. So rather than saying install this package, you say run this script which someone wrote.
You say install this thing.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it goes and under the covers, it gets a script and runs the script. And whatever actually happens is the software is compiled and installed on your local machine.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
I don't know. I feel like this is a retrograde step. First of all, I feel like PPAs are better than this and snaps are better than PPAs. So why somebody felt that they wanted to introduce an AUR-like system to Ubuntu in current year argument, I just don't fathom.
Well, I can kind of see why. There are some people who are quite evangelical about the AUR and the fact that it is, if they're well maintained package scripts, then you end up with the bleeding edge of everything if you want it. Now, that's good or bad, depending on the point of view. But I can see why someone might want the static underpinnings of Ubuntu, or relatively static underpinnings of Ubuntu, but being able to compile whatever on top of it.
I just find it curious that they cite the stability of Ubuntu as being the thing they value for Ubuntu server and why they don't run Arch on their servers, but then have chosen to introduce a mechanism that adds the instability of Arch to Ubuntu. I just don't understand.
So have you tried it?
No, of course not. It's mental.
I have. It is absolutely full of bugs.
Of course it is.
So I think this is interesting. It's by the look of it, it's made by a young person who's very enthusiastic and thought, I'll try and make this thing. And it's a bunch of shell scripts thrown together. It's a bit buggy in places. It makes a lot of assumptions and there's very little error checking. So no, it's not production grade. It's not. It absolutely does introduce some instability into your system. I tried it out. I filed a bug, and the chap was super attentive and tried to fix it and did a fix on their main branch. So I won't fault their enthusiasm and the thought behind it. The implementation needs a bit of work. That's all I would say. Next up, Mark.
Ubuntu 2104 has been released. And the main headline feature in 2104 is that it's now based on LXQt 0.16, which has more things in it. And it also has a new archiver, which is based on ngrampa from Mate.
Huh. Yeah, I looked at the release notes for Ubuntu and Execute, and there's a bit of a... It's not like a whole bunch of shiny new things. It's like many interim releases over the years. It's, it's iteration, newer this, newer that, higher version numbers of everything. Not a tremendous amount to write home about, but, it's updates, and updates are good, and bug fixes are good, and, new stuff is good. So
yeah, I understand how those transitions go. This is really about uplifting to the latest and greatest version of LXQt, which I understand is no small endeavour, because there are many moving parts to delivering that, and that's a bunch of work that needed to take place.
Next up, also on the 2104 gravy train, is Ubuntu Mate, the green one. And gosh, there's a fair amount of stuff that changed in there. Pretty colours, nice new icons for the Yaru theme. And it says here that there's Suru icons and LibreOffice style. What does that mean?
Well, the lovely Yaru developers maintain a set of icons for LibreOffice, and they retouched all of those to fit in with the Ubuntu Mate look and feel. And Heather Hellsworth from the desktop team, who maintains LibreOffice, was able to land that new icon set in 2104. So within Ubuntu Mate, we were able to make that look and feel the default for Ubuntu Mate, which kind of joined up. It's one of the many things that happen to join up like a cohesive,
makes it more
styling
consistent
across, everything.
So, a lot of the notes seem to talk about Yaru stuff. That seems to be the underlying theme, is mostly Yaru related.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the cut and thrust of everything we were working on.
Nice. And Ayatane indicators have a control center applet now, so you can manage your indicators. What does that mean?
So the indicators have a number of tweakable settings, like how you want the date presented in date and time, or what options you want presented in the session. All of them have a number of things you can tweak. And where those options exist, they're now presented in a little control panel, because people always used to complain, I want 24-hour or 12-hour clock. I want to show the date and time, not just the date all the time. So all of that's configurable now.
It says here, Mutiny layout improved. Don't I remember you talking about removing the Mutiny layout not too long ago?
It was mutinied.
It was. So I did. Back in October, November last year, I yanked it out. And there was something of a mutiny regarding that. So I did a bit of soul searching, and it was really around, there were a number of technologies that supported that panel layout that were buggy, and a big cause of bug reports and user frustration. So it's been reimagined using some different tooling to solve all of the bugs, but preserve that look and feel.
Cool. You've also thrown htop, NeoFetch, and Inksy into the default install. I can't help but feel that's to make it so people take screenshots of Ubuntu Mate with NeoFetch open and paste them all over the internet.
Yes, and also NeoFetch now supports the Ubuntu Mate logo.
Oh, right, okay, I see how this goes. Righto, that's Ubuntu Mate. What's new in Zubuntu, Martin?
So Zubuntu is sporting the latest and greatest XFCE 416, which is their first outing with an entirely GTK3 only XFCE. And that's off the back of a year's worth of updates and fixes by that team. No small undertaking. And also supported to some extent by some of Mate 124, which you'll spot as a little theme that's going on here in sort of, the flavour community.
Ah, I see. I also noticed there's a minimal install. Was there not a minimal install in Zubuntu previously?
Well, there was. They still have it. I think they call it Zubuntu Core.
Oh, yes.
But it's not produced on canonical infrastructure. It's something that the project produces, which is just a tiny install. But now, if you use the full fat download, it now has that option in Ubiquity to say, give me the minimal version.
Sweet. And they got fractional scaling in the display preferences as well.
That's impressive. I'm Yeah, I'm going to have a look at how they did that because I've been grappling with that one.
I noticed the sorry, I can't stop giggling looking at this new software.
Oh yeah,
this new software. What is this new software that they've added? Go on, tell us, Martin.
The new software is, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's this thing called HexChat, which is an IRC client, which is brand new. It's not been around since the 1970s at all. And Synaptic.
Interesting.
Which is apparently still popular.
Yeah, there's a lot. I see a lot of YouTubers.
Yeah.
Mostly the greybeards who say, yeah, no, get rid of that. You want Synaptic. Anyway, moving on. Mark, what's new in Ubuntu land?
Well, as usual in Ubuntu land, it's got all the latest and greatest KDE stuff. So it's now running KDE Plasma 5.21.4. It's got a new version of Krita, I'm going to say. I've never worked out how to pronounce that one. And that's now version 4.4.3, Kdevelop version 5.6.2, which I believe you've been playing with, Alan.
Yeah, I had a little play with Kdevelop, and I don't know why I've never loaded it before. Everyone has their favorite text editor or IDE, but I had a little play with Kdevelop, and I think I'm going to switch to that for a while because I'm on KDE,
right?
And I thought, I quite fancy using this a little while longer because it's really fast to launch, it's fast to navigate, it's pretty intuitive if you're used to using KDE. So rather than having something that's a bit different, great as VS Code is, great as Sublime Text is, having something that integrates well. And this kind of calls back to a conversation we had in a previous episode where we talked about what tools you use. And it kind of got me thinking maybe I'll try and use a few more of these tools. So yeah, I'm going to give it a go. It's very nice so far.
Cool. The other interesting thing about the new version of Ubuntu is that there's now a Plasma Wayland session installed, although it's not the default option.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, that's hot on the heels of Ubuntu proper, so it looks like these two versions of Ubuntu are going to be bringing that forward for the next LTS.
The Ubuntu Budgie team have cranked out their first Raspberry Pi 4 image. I haven't had a chance to check that out, but I've dug out my 4 and my 400, and I want to give it a go on one of those. They've updated Budgie Desktop, and they mention desktop icons implementation is not installed by default in Ubuntu Budgie, but available with this Budgie Desktop view. Is this so that you can put icons on the desktop, which
Right.
Yeah,
design experts tell us we're all naughty boys and we shouldn't do it and it's bad.
Yeah.
But they'll let us do it anyway.
You're right. I find it fascinating that we'd still refer to a lot of these things as desktop environments when we should call them, shells, because Budgie is Budgie Desktop, but hasn't had a desktop metaphor, but now it does. So good for them.
Well done. And they've got a one-click Mac-like makeover button using a theme called White Sir. Wonder where they got the name from. And some icons and a whole ton of bug fixes. And it also mentions there's a desktop layout browser palette, which looks very familiar. Is this something they've hoodwinked you into working on, or is it something they got inspiration from Mate, or...
Yes, I think inspired by. So
Right.
Budgie Welcome is a fork of Ubuntu Mate Welcome, and they now have a same stroke similar desktop layout selector and also a browser palette.
Sweet. And the final 2104 release we're going to mention is Ubuntu Studio, Martin.
Yes, so Ubuntu Studio is also now based on KDE, so that sports the same KDE Plasma as Ubuntu. And then it has a bunch of things that I don't understand except for the last one. So it has this thing called Studio Controls. It's newer. There was no links to what that was or what it does in the release notes, so I have no idea what that is or how important it might be in my life. There's this other thing I can't pronounce, which Gorgio, I think, which is something to do with managing audio sessions, whatever that might be. I'm an audio Luddite, so I don't know. And then KX Studio, which had to go to their website to find out what that is. I keep hearing people talking about it. That's a big collection of stuff for audio. including things like, the jack connectors to set up all of your filters and profiling. Now, the only one I did understand is it ships with OBS Studio 26.1.2, which they also now have jack support in. Jack being a sort of a core piece of the Ubuntu Studio offering, because that's like the pro audio piece that people on Linux who want that are looking for.
Yes, indeed. And that's all for the 2104 roundup. You may have noticed a bit of a theme of not a lot going on in 2104. We'll talk a little bit more about that, maybe in our next episode. But back to the community news. Mark, there's another piece of news.
Yes, Ubuntu 2110 is going to be called the Impish Injury.
Injury?
Indri. I-N-D-R-I.
You can get a plaster for that.
Oh, dear. It's a type of lemur.
Right. Okay.
I was disappointed to find that there is no lemur emoji.
Right. Okay. And in other Ubuntu release news, 1604 LTS has reached the end of standard maintenance. So it's now in extended security maintenance, like 1404 and 1204 before it. So you should either upgrade or switch on ESM, which interestingly is free for up to 3 machines. So you can just enable ESM. You go to the website, ubuntu.com/ESM, I think it is. And you can enable it. If you're an Ubuntu member, you can enable it for up to 50 machines. So if you've got up to 50 1604 machines kicking around in your house and you want to still get those security updates, you can do that.
I think if you've got up to 50 1604 machines in your house, you need to reevaluate your life priorities.
Or possibly present a podcast.
And obviously, if you've got a commercial reason for having extended security maintenance, you can, of course, pay Canonical to have many more than 50 machines in a commercial environment. Finally, there is one event coming up, which is the Linux Applications Summit, which is from the 13th to the 15th of May, and it's online everywhere. They've announced a couple of the keynote speakers, who are Karen Sandler and Kathy Giori. I think there may be more keynotes coming. The full timetable is online. If you go to conf.linuxsummit.org, you can follow the links, and the full schedule is there. It's the same tool that they use for Academy, so it's very easy to use. You can see a good overview of everything that's happening on each of the 3 days that the conference runs. But yeah, that's 13th to the 15th of May. Keep an eye on linuxapplicationsummit.org for more details. And that's all for the community news this week. And now some items from the wider tech world. Martin, what's first up in the news?
I was delighted to see there is a new Windows 10 handheld gaming PC now available for pre-order on Amazon.
Why were you delighted to see this?
Because it's from my good friends at GPD. So it's the GPD Win3. It's a handheld console pre-installed with Windows 10 Home, which has Switch-like controllers.
So not like the little clamshell design. It's not like that with the tiny little tactile keys. It's different. It's more like a Nintendo Switch style that you hold on either end.
Yes, and also it has a slide down keyboard. So you can, I don't know if you slide up the screen or you slide down the keyboard, but it's a physical keyboard that you can slide down and does expose a keyboard that you've just described beneath it.
Nice.
What are the specs?
Well, it's a 720p touchscreen. It's 16 gigs of RAM, a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD. It comes in an Intel Core i5 or i7 package. It has whatever Intel Iris Plus graphics are, which has 96 compute units, and Thunderbolt 4, which my understanding is exactly the same as Thunderbolt 3. other than a bit of a rebrand. I don't think there's any technical specification changes.
So does that mean you could put a Razer Core on your desk?
Yes.
And have this tiny little handhold thing that looks like a switch in your hand with a cable going out of it to give you faster GPU?
Yes. You could plug it into a 3090, and I think it's got enough grunt to actually feed, high-end GPU, the CPU cycles it needs to mostly function.
Well, it's only got a 720p resolution, so there's not a tremendous number of pixels that it's throwing around.
Well, unless you connect it to an external display, because Thunderbolt graphics work better when it's connected to an external display rather than the internal panel.
Oh, really? I thought it was just the same. Oh, okay.
No, because otherwise it has to send the data out to the GPU and then back to the system to display on the panel.
Gotcha.
So, it's available for pre-order. They're expected to start shipping on June the 2nd. It does have a docking station option as well. Now, little bit on the spendy side compared to what GPD have put out in the past. So the i5 model, which is an 1135 G7, weighs in at $1,130, which is eye-watering. And the i7, which is an 1165 G7, it weighs in at $1,310.
And will we be expecting to see Ubuntu Mate running on this anytime soon?
Yeah, they sent you one.
I may or may not have been in touch with their sales and marketing department. I did contact them some weeks ago for an engineering sample.
Of course you did.
And they explained that they were ironing out some manufacturing issues at that time, but now it's available for pre-order. I think first order of business tomorrow morning is to drop them a reminder email and see if I can have one of these fine devices sent this way so I can put Ubuntu Mate on it and prepare an image.
$1,300. I noticed that a Nintendo Switch goes for about 180 quid now.
Right. It's quite the difference.
Yeah. Now, and while you wouldn't be able to get some of those high-end games, I mean, to be fair, it is only got the Iris graphics, whereas, the Switch, I don't know how they compare the GPUs in those two devices.
Yeah, well, that would be an interesting test to actually compare, like, what the difference in performance is. I think the real difference is it's the ecosystem. So you've got access to that, PC gaming ecosystem on something like this.
And you could plug a giant amount of storage via a Thunderbolt.
Yeah,
plus it's got
a giant amount of GPU.
a terabyte on board as well, which helps. But then PC games are much larger than Switch games generally. But it's a fascinating looking device. It does remind me of some of the Intel devices that were being touted in around 2009. And Ubuntu was working on a thing called Ubuntu Mobile long before Ubuntu Touch for these devices. And they were shaped just like this, with grippy things on either side with the display in the middle, and some of them had awful like pop down keyboards. They're very reminiscent of those things, but they keep iterating on these things, and around about now the software and the hardware are at a point where it's actually usable and the battery life isn't just 10 minutes.
And it seems fitting that GPD should reboot that idea, because they have kind of been the renaissance of like the netbook in recent years as well.
Yeah, totally. Next up in the news, Audacity has joined Muse Group. That's not News Group, that's Muse Group for yes. And I discovered this via a video on YouTube, which was had a fun thumbnail of from the video maker, a guy called Martin Keary, who's known as Tantacruel on YouTube. And it was a bit tongue-in-cheek. I've joined Audacity. And he's joined the team, and Audacity has joined the group of audio applications, including Muse Score, as well as Ultimate Guitar. And I think some might have thought, oh no, Audacity is going to be subsumed by this horrible organization, and it's going to turn into a terrible application, or it's going to become a paid app or something like that. It seems that that's exactly the opposite of what's going to happen. It seems like they really want to put some focus on design and usability of Audacity and really improve those things over time that I think the Audacity developers have wanted to do, but haven't had the resources or the time to be able to do it. So I'd strongly recommend having a watch of the video from Martin.
Yes.
It's very fun. It's very engaging. His style of delivery is excellent. He talks more about why and what the future may hold for Audacity as well.
And there's some really good interviews with some of the original Audacity developers and where it came from and why they built it and why they built it the way they did. It's really interesting to watch. Yeah,
I felt that interview was very sensitive to the origins of Audacity and acknowledging, that it's not the prettiest or most well-defined. The user interface is not great. I think he pokes fun at the 7 magnifying glasses in the user interface in his video. But you get the feeling that this is somebody who's got a track record of managing audio-related open source projects very well and cares about that space and wants to really improve Audacity, not just technically, but for the audio production community at large.
Yeah, I thought it was the tongue-in-cheek part, right at the start where he had a little dig at the design. I thought, uh-oh. And then, as you go on, like you say, the interviews were great. They were really well done and sympathetic. And I found it interesting seeing the people behind Audacity, because I've never even considered it. I've never even, looked into it. It's not like there's big personalities that I would recognize in this software development. And I guess it's partly because the target audience for Audacity isn't necessarily us Linux nerds. The target audience for Audacity is musicians and people who are creating audio projects. And so, we wouldn't necessarily know them.
And the video is worth watching in order to discover some preposterously creative ways in which Audacity has been put to use over the years as well.
Yes. Yeah. Save that for the video. Yeah. Go and watch the video just for that. That's brilliant as well. So we look forward to a bright future for Audacity in Muse Group. Next up, Mark, security news.
Well, security news, legal news, mapping news, it's all converging on this one. So a security researcher called Aaron Topons has received legal threats from the mapping location company What3Words.
For those who don't know, what is What3Words?
What3Words is a site/app where you can pick a location somewhere on the globe and it will give you 3 words which refer to that place.
That square 3 meters or
3 by 3 meter square. Right. Each 3 by 3 meter square has a unique set of words, but the only way to find out what those words are is to use What3Words. Their proprietary API and database, right? Which is quite crucial to this story. So, what's been going on is that a researcher has been looking at the algorithm behind What3Words to try and identify sort of how reliable it is to use in crucial situations like emergency services where you need to know for sure where somebody is. So if you call up an ambulance and you say, I'm at, Face Lamppost Dolphin, they're definitely going to know where you are. They're not going to go to, the house down the road. And Aaron Topons, who's the subject of this legal threat, offered to share a copy of a piece of software called What3Words, which is a previous piece of work that has been done to reverse engineer the algorithm behind What3Words and basically make it available so people have an alternative way of finding addresses from or finding locations from these 3-word addresses. However, What3Words aren't at all happy about this. They're known for having a very aggressive PR strategy and being quite litigious, and basically are of the opinion that What3Words violates their copyright, although What3Words say very specifically they don't.
But that's not been tested in court. So
that's not been tested in court because basically all of the people who they've gone after like this so far don't have the resources to fight.
Right.
So, Aaron said on Twitter, here are their demands and I'm going to abide by them because it's not worth me, going to court over sharing some links on Twitter, essentially. Interestingly, in parallel with all of this, Andrew Cyber-Gibbons Tierney, who's been doing this research, has published some findings around some interesting things which you might not expect around, how similar some of these addresses are. For example, there are two addresses in London, Gear Fine Larger and Gear Fines Larger. Spot the difference there, which are within 10 kilometres of each other in London, and Hand Basket and Hand Basket, which are within 40 kilometres of one another in China.
So the key thing to note here is you generally don't see these things written down. They're meant for you to like phone the emergency services and read it out under pressure for you to say it out loud. And the fact that Gear Fine Lager and Gear Fines Larger sound similar is the problem. Yeah. It's
larger?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which one was it? Yeah.
Is that actually the point? It's intended to be used to communicate your location if you're in an emergency situation.
Yeah, so it's not like this is what they created the service for, but it's one of the big things that they promote as, you've never heard of us before, but we're saving people's lives because we've got this amazing use case which no one else has a solution for.
Okay.
There's every so often there's a news article that'll come out that, pregnant woman on a mountain was found using 3 words. Or, someone was in danger and they called the emergency services and they didn't know where they were. If there's no road signs near you and there's no way for you to easily know where you are, but you've got an app that's got 3 words on it and it knows where you are and you just read those 3 words, it's more efficient than you trying to read a latitude and longitude. That's their selling point, right? And if you don't know where you are, it's a way of communicating where you are. But the whole point about it is it needs to be easy to communicate and accurate to communicate because you don't want the ambulance to go 40 miles away because they get the wrong location. That's the worst outcome is you think you're going to be saved and they go to the wrong place. So
yes.
Yeah.
Another interesting side effect of this whole episode is the Streisand effect, which is, where legal action to try and block knowledge or access to a certain piece of information therefore means that a lot more people get to know about it who might not have originally known or cared about it. So as a result of this happening, there's been lots of publicity around what 3 words and a lot of people publicly posting it or posting links to where it's shared or finding other implementations which weren't originally part of this at all. So yeah, it seems like this sort of thing is going to be around for a while.
And that's all the news for this week. And that's all for episode 9. Thank you all for listening. Next week, we'll be discussing the future of Ubuntu releases. In the meantime, you can send us your emails to show@ubuntupodcast.org, which we may read out next week. You can also chat with us online on Telegram if you go to ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram. And finally, thanks to Joe Ressington for making us sound lovely. Go to joeress.com if you're interested in making yourself sound lovely. See you next time.